Hello, this year is dedicated to Rachel Leah Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi L'Ilui Nishmata. We're going to begin with some question and answers. Okay, why is the method for the atonement ritual of Azazel done as it's done? Don't get me wrong, I'm not an animal activist or an ethical vegetarian or anything. I have no problem with shechita and korbanos involving animals. I'm confused because I learned that we shouldn't inflict unnecessary pain to animals for our own neshama sensitivity. Yet this one atonement ritual seems so barbaric. Okay, so there are really two questions here. Okay, you have no problem with shechita or with korbanos involving animals. So what that tells me is that you do have a strong sense of this, that animals and humans are not on the same plane. Otherwise, how could you justify using them for any purpose? It would be exploitive. It would be barbaric. So the fact that you see things as being on a different level, okay, is important. So the question would be, what do you find barbaric about this korban? So what I would suggest, and this is what I'm saying, there are two things involved. One is residual feelings about korbanos and shechita, which I think you still have some. Otherwise, the word barbaric would not come so readily to your writing. But the real issue, I think, is the horrific nature of this particular korban, which is clearly purposely so. So, by horrific, I mean that the death of the goat wasn't pretty it wasn't pretty, it was horrific, and it was meant to be visually astoundingly awful. So let's focus on the second part before going back to what may be there or may not be there. It could be that I'm seeing what isn't there in the first part. So Rav Hirsch talks about that, as do others such as Ramban. This particular korban is different than other korbanot. In what regard? The basic statement that every korban is making is, here's something of me that's like an animal. And we don't have to fool ourselves. There's a whole menagerie here. We are full of animal instincts. The desires, the territoriality, the random aggression, the insecurities that have to do with the need for primacy, the fear of attack. All of this is there. So all of these animal instincts are not unholy, which is important to know. Meaning they inherently could be uplifted if we desire to do so. So even sin offerings have to do with this. I've acknowledged what's wrong, and I'm willing to rededicate these energies to Hashem. So this is why so much attention is spent in the detail of the mitzvot of korbanos. This animal, not that animal. Even where to place it on the altar. The north side, the place of concealment, as opposed to the south side, the place of revelation. The enormous importance played to thought. If you lose track of where you are and who you are when you're doing the korban, if you think that, if your plan is to eat it in the wrong place, since the place has enormous symbolic value, or at a different time, it could invalidate the entire korban. So that would have to do with any korban. So the word korban, which comes from the word karov, has to take the aspects of one's personality that normally could be a source of distance or not, could go either way, and elevate them. And this would be true even for the korban todah, where a bird is used. A bird is prey, a bird is vulnerable, but a person's been through danger, been through illness, been through whatever. And they have to acknowledge their gratitude and salvation. It begins by saying, I'm like this bird. I'm completely vulnerable to everything in the world. And even these feelings of vulnerability can either distance you by making a person more protective, make them yearn for control, or they could be elevating in terms of ultimate surrender to Hashem. So this is how all korbanos work. This korban is somewhat different. The korban, of course, as you realize, has two parts. You have the two goats. The goats are both in the Beis HaMikdash. The Kohen has to place his hands on both of them. He draws lots. One of them goes La Hashem, and the other La Azazel. So let's look at the first part before we actually take away the goat that's doomed to Azazel. Let's talk about what's going on. So the first thing to note is that this is a korban tzibur, that it has to do with the nature of the entire body of Klal Yisrael. It's not a response to some individual sin or a rescue or anything else having to do with that individual's life. The next thing to note is that the animal in question is a goat. So what does a goat tell us about the collective animal soul of an entire people? So goats are different than most other animals. You can't get a goat to do what you want it to do. Goats love freedom, and they're full of their own desires. They don't work all day long, every day, for the